Kind of you. Thank you. And thank you for having me back. And it's wonderful. I see so many familiar and friendly faces from over the last 14 weeks or so that we did, Ralph and I did, or 12 weeks that we did the step series with many of the folks that are on here. So it just feels like I'm back home. So thanks for having me. And it just amazes me that in the last now over a year, you guys have gathered. Many of you've been here virtually every Tuesday, having this conversation around the 12th step. So it would be for the idea that I might bring something new or different to that conversation. Would require some hubris on my part, but I do believe that I will bring my own experience with it, and that's really kind of what I have, the tact I've sort of decided to take this evening, and approach it a little differently than maybe I typically do. So you may discover that Ali's introduction was a terrible oversell of the product that gets delivered this evening, but I'm just going to do what we do and talk about my experience with this 11th step and with this individual adventure. Right? That's what. Let me read specifically what the 12 and 12 says in that paragraph. It is really speaking in this part of the 12 and 12 kind of specifically to meditation, but I think it applies just equally to prayer. And I see very little space between those two. I think there's a real intersection between meditation and prayer. Certainly, I don't view them necessarily as separate exercises. But it says, aided by such instruction and example as we can find, it is essentially an individual adventure, something which each one of us works out in his own way, but its object is always the same: to improve our conscious contact with God. So, and really that's what everything in Alcoholics Anonymous, I believe, is geared to do. All of our steps, our book says early in our text that in our personal stories, each of us in our own language and from our own point of view talks about how he established a relationship with God. So all of our 12 steps are guiding me in that direction. And the 11th step is one of the places where I begin, as it says, to continue and to build upon this conscious contact, this conscious awareness. Pam, what you read, that Appendix 2 is particularly early in my recovery, proves to be an invaluable piece of literature. It was an invaluable tool for me. And obviously, I'm not alone in that, because even in the reading, as Pam read, it says that we may have given the impression that most of us or all of us were having this profound spiritual experience reminiscent of what Bill discussed in his story. And I will tell you that they must have discovered this quickly, because Appendix 2 was included in the second printing of the first edition of the Big Book. They quickly patched up that seeming hole in the program, because I was much more in the category of what you talked about, what you read about, Pam, is that having a personality change, having a profound alteration in my reaction to life. And it even talks about, right, that as you read, that this awareness, it talks about this awareness of a higher power. It says our more religious folks call it a conscious contact. So one of the things that has happened for me as a result of our steps, and that I continue to develop and grow, is the awareness of this higher power, not an unconscious, but a conscious awareness of God's presence. Front and center awareness of God's role in my life today. And as our book says, the great fact for us is that our Creator has entered into our lives in a powerful and meaningful way. I want to stay ever aware of that. Now, I don't. I'll be the first to say that I am kind of the lights come on here off and on all during the day. I am connected and disconnected on a semi-regular basis. Or that's not true. What I believe is I'm always connected. My awareness, the consciousness of that contact is what changes. You know, I think I shared this story a few weeks ago on the Wednesday night meeting, but I came home. It's now been a few years ago, but it's a story I remember. I came home one afternoon, and I was in seemingly alone here in our condo, and I'd been here maybe an hour doing different things, and I wandered into the kitchen to get something and turned around, and all of a sudden Connie was right there. I mean, she was right on top of me, and it startled me. And I said, "Where the hell did you come from?" You know, and she says, "I've been here the whole time." She had been here. She'd been in the other room. She had been there, but I had been unaware of her presence. And I will tell you that I think often that is the way this relationship with God works, that He is there. God is ready the moment I am. But I am often blocked by worldly clamors, as Bill talked about, mostly those within myself. But this individual adventure that I really want to, because I have been on, my sobriety date is June 30th, 1989. And from that moment till tonight, boy, it has certainly been an adventure. It has been an individual adventure. It has been informed by the groups. It has been informed by my participation in AA. It has been informed by you sharing your experience with me. And I've listened to you, and I've tried a ton of stuff. I have sampled off of the spiritual buffet in Alcoholics Anonymous. And maybe you have too. You sit in a meeting and you hear that man or woman talk about some practice they're doing that they have found useful or helpful. I'm a run home and try it kind of guy. And sometimes that has had equally good effects for me. And sometimes that particular practice or approach might not have resonated and provided me the same impact that it may have others. But it is an individual adventure. Our book gives us, the 12 and 12 says that our libraries, and I would say now our internet is a treasure trove of spiritual books. And there are the great religions of the world. And there are so many different spiritual disciplines and spiritual paths. And it is my belief, at least my experience with my limited participation, that all of those tend to lead to the same destination. And when you get in your car perhaps, and you're headed off on a trip, and you load in your destination in your GPS or on Google Maps, usually we get about three options. We get about three different routes we can take. It says you want the shortest route, you want the scenic route, and you want the least amount of turns. And then I add a fourth. I take a lot of side trips on my trip to this spiritual Mecca, if you will, to this conscious contact. And I'm so glad that AA has given me that room. That in fact, I have been encouraged to embrace these variety of disciplines and find what works for me. So I will tell you, I'm going to go back through and kind of try to summarize in the next 30 minutes that adventure from 1989 till tonight. Some of the turns and some of the ebbs and flows and some of the changes in practices and some of the revelations that have come as a result of that. Those places where I have, as our book said, where I have rebelled from prayer and meditation, where I have stopped, and just share with you my personal journey through here. And when I arrived at AA in 1989, I didn't arrive with any particular spiritual disciplines, or I wasn't on a spiritual path. I didn't grow up a religious guy. I went to church, but I wasn't religious. I attended church, just like we know some of us attend AA, but aren't active in our recovery. And it wasn't a slight. I didn't have a bad experience. I just didn't have any experience. I just kind of hung out at church, waiting for church to be over because I wanted to be doing something else. But it wasn't bad. It was just, that's what we did, and I had to go. And I quit going the moment I wasn't required to go when I got a little bit older. When I showed up at AA, I didn't have any particular set of spiritual beliefs. And in fact, I was rebelling a bit. I would not, at the end of meetings, I would not hold hands and say the Lord's Prayer, as was the custom at most of the meetings I attended. And I'm grateful that the men and women in AA told me that was okay. That was up to me. And I had a guy that came up to me one night and he asked me, he said, "Steve, what is your resistance to that? Why aren't you willing to do that?" And I was being really honest. And I said, I don't know what I believe. I don't want to be a hypocrite, and I'm not just going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya with the rest of the campers like everybody else. I didn't show up here to be a lemming and just follow everybody around. And I was holding on to some personal independence, whatever I thought that was. And he said, this guy had heard my treatment fifth step, which was just a bit of a confessional where I had talked about infidelities in my marriage, and I had talked about 6 DUIs and totaling 6 automobiles and a head-on collision going the wrong way down the interstate that hospitalized some people. I talked about being drunk at the hospital when my daughter was born. I talked about stealing time and money from a family business. But he said, but hypocrisy, he said, that's where you draw the line, huh? All this other stuff, but oh, don't be a hypocrite. He said, that's really impressive, man. And he said, I got good news for you and bad news for you. And I said, I'll play. And he said, I said, what's the bad news? And he said, the bad news is hypocrisy is way down your list of problems. And you might ought to address them in the order in which they will kill your ass. And I said, well, what's the good news? And he said, the good news is there's room for another hypocrite in Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, man, I was glad to hear that. I'm more glad tonight than I was then, because I need that. I need you to make room for a hypocrite in AA if I'm going to keep hanging out here, because I'm not going to mean to, but I'm going to be hypocritical, because we're going to talk about perfect ideals, and I'm going to fall far short of those, not on purpose, but through my own human frailty. So that's where I was struggling initially in 1989. My sponsor, Pam, took me right to what you read. When I was pushing back, I went through my big book and I marked out everywhere in my book with a black marker where it said spiritual experience or spiritual awakening. I felt that those were unavailable to me, and I didn't like that language. And he took me back to that Appendix 2, and he helped me find that language that was more accessible to me at the time. So I wrote above, everywhere it said spiritual awakening or spiritual experience, I wrote personality change, because apparently I was willing to have a personality change long before I was willing to have a spiritual experience. And he said, you're hung up on the language, and I want you to have the experience. I don't care what you call it. I don't care what label you put on it. Are you willing to give yourself over to this and have an experience? And then you get to describe it however you want to describe it, Steve. It's your experience. It's an individual adventure. that allowed me to move a little bit forward. I went along like that in my sobriety for a good while, but I was not practicing any regular prayer and meditation. It particularly, as outlined in our book, there wasn't. I might say a prayer in the morning, but there wasn't much discipline to my spiritual practices. And in 1997, I had a crisis in faith. And in 1997, I was sitting in a book study with some men, and we had made a commitment to each other to be as honest as we were capable with each other. And we were reading in We Agnostics, and we read in there where it said that I could evade it no longer, that crushed by self-imposed crisis, God is everything or God is nothing. He either is or he isn't. What is my choice to be? And I realized I had not made a choice. I realized that I was not treating this God of my understanding, this higher power in AA, as if it were everything. And I wasn't treating it as if it were nothing. I was treating it, I think, like the 12 and 12 says, like a Bush League pinch hitter. Right? I was treating it, call on it in emergency. Ask God for help when I was in a jam by my description. But there wasn't that everyday use of a belief that God is active in all areas of my life all the time. And I was not consciously pursuing that, nor was I consciously aware of that. You know, we're told that that this prayer and meditation can take on various labels, if you will. There are different approaches. And our book says that there may be a wide variation in the way each of us conceives of and approaches that power. And that approach, I believe, is the spiritual discipline, is whether that is embracing the 12 steps of AA, or whether that is, on top of that, perhaps whatever prayer and meditative practice I might adopt or be a part of. Some people are gonna choose an Eastern meditation, a mindfulness, perhaps. Some people are going to try to empty the mind, and there might be guided meditation, there might be moving meditation, right? And I've touched all those bases, and I will talk about them as I move forward here, or how I kind of evolved from one to the other, going down that buffet line that I mentioned. In prayer, we may do. We're given some pretty specific direction about prayer in the big book, but the on other disciplines, there's intercessory prayer, there's prayers of gratitude, there's prayers of supplication, where perhaps I earnestly and honestly am asking for God to give me power I don't have, to do something I can't do. Those prayers are strewn throughout our book, right? In the fourth step, I ask God for power I don't have. I ask Him to help me, grant me pity, patience, and tolerance. I ask Him to help me not argue or retaliate. When I get to that 11th step in our book, I ask God to divorce my thinking from selfish, pitying, dishonest motives. I'm asking for power I don't have to do and I can't do. But our book says that we don't pray for things for ourselves. We are praying for the knowledge of God's will for me and the power to carry it out. I will tell you, over time, I am much clearer today on God's will for me, but I am often resistant to honestly asking for the power to carry it out. The follow through. I'll throw up a prayer, but what about the follow through? What about the action that is the demonstration of the faith behind the prayer? to pray and not take any responsibility for then engaging. When I turn my will and my life over in the third step, when I say, God, do with me as you will, when I decide that I'm going to seek a God-centered rather than a self-centered life, I have a responsibility to take action, to, as the Serenity Prayer says, to change the things I can. And so that becomes part of this. And when I had that crisis of faith, I began for the first time to do some morning exercises that included at the time some reading, some prayer, and some journaling. So I wanted to, I've got several, I've got a box that I keep a lot of stuff in, and I don't pull this out very often. And today, most things are I have electronically filed. But here I have a sheet of paper from August the 23rd of 1999. And on the morning of August, or the evening of August the 23rd of 1999, I asked myself those end of day review questions. Among them was I dishonest? And it says, yes, I lied to Jerry about golf. I just didn't want to go play. Do I owe an apology? Yeah, I owe Jerry an apology for lying to him. Have I kept something to myself which I should share with another person at once? I need to tell my sponsor I lied to Jerry. Jerry had a big day with me, apparently, on August the 23rd of 1999. I see my friend Danny smiling because he knows the Jerry I'm talking about. It says, what could I have done better? Well, I could have said from the beginning that it was not a good time for me. Was I thinking of myself? Yes, I was. It says, was I thinking of what I could do for others? No, I was not. It says, what 7 deadly sins? On this particular thing, I would list the 7 deadly sins and circle ones that I was aware of I engaged in that day. And I can't help but smile because I'm looking. Gluttony led the list on August the 23rd of 1999. And I will tell you that on May the 4th, 2021, gluttony is holding its own in the top 7. I promise. So I'm trying to do better. But that is tangible evidence. And that's really what I wanted to show, that there was a tangible evidence that I became engaged in trying to embrace some of the direction in the book, and in this case by doing a written end of day review. In 2008, I traveled to Oregon, to Grants Pass, Oregon, to be part of a roundup out there, the Rogue River Roundup. And some of you have heard me share this story, but in the months and probably a couple of years leading up to that, I had been struggling with meditation. That's the term I used, and that's what it felt like. I was struggling with meditation. And one of our wonderful, iconic members of AA, Howard Polans, who passed away a little over 2 years ago now, Howard was going to be out there. And I didn't know Howard real well at the time, but we would become close friends. But I knew he was a devoted practitioner of meditation. So I went up to Howard when I got there, and I said, Howard, I'm struggling with meditation, and I'd like to talk to you about it. And he couldn't have been more excited, because he just loved meditating. But I think maybe even more than loving meditating, he loved to talk to you about meditating. He loved to share that gift of meditation, what he had found with others. And he said, Steve, he said, let's go to my room. And we went to his hotel room, and he pulled 2 chairs up right next to each other, and he looked over at me. He said, now, what are you doing now? And I said, well, I'm really not doing anything now, Howard. And he just cackled. He rubbed his hands together like a seed, went, he said, I see. He said, your problem's not technique, it's commitment. He said, you're not struggling with meditation, you're not meditating. He said, are you willing to struggle with meditation? Are you willing to commit to the process of meditation? Now, Let me read from this little sheet of paper. On May the 3rd of 2008, it says, I just finished speaking at the Rogue Roundup. I spent 2 hours earlier today in the room with Howard Poland. Howard said to me, Steve, why would you spend all that time on steps 1 through 10 and then not want to spend time with the God you found through that process? Why would you want to go? Why would you want to follow the treasure map all the way to the treasure and not open it up? And I got to tell you, I'm still there, and there are days I'm still guilty of that, of following the map, reading the menu, but not eating the meal. And boy, isn't that to my detriment when that happens? And he says, why? And you could see it in his face that this was not him admonishing me. This was him sharing with me, Steve, don't not take advantage of this. And what he was doing, he could barely contain what that experience had been for him, what that 11th step, what his adventure had led him to, what he had found as a result of that adventure. And he so wanted that for me and for all of us. And it was a remarkable time. But I got to tell you this, when I reached in that box today to pull up these old papers, and I've got a lot of them, that May 8th, 2008 was at the top. And I already knew I was going to tell you that story about Howard because I always tell it. But I did not remember I had written that down. I did not remember that had been part of an evening review that I had chronicled. And so this was a found treasure for me today, the result of being invited here. What a wonderful experience, what a spiritual experience I had today, which isn't some big deal. Let me tell you, in my opinion, what a spiritual experience is. It is experiencing something spiritual. It is just adding the spiritual component, the fourth dimension, to what is a three-dimensional world. And I just have a different experience of it, a richer, more meaningful experience with it. And Ali and all of you, by inviting me here tonight, you gave me that experience earlier today, and then the experience of sharing it with you tonight. In 2013, my sponsor, I had gotten Don Major out of Louisville. My sponsor here in Nashville had died, and I went about a year without a sponsor because there was just nobody that was really adequate to taking me on. I don't know what, but I ended up, Don and I were at a conference and we went on a walk, and I told him a secret I'd been holding for about 3 years. And I said, since I told you that secret, I got to make you my sponsor to hold you to that confidentiality agreement. And he's held up his end of the bargain as far as I can tell. And Don, as he talked with me there in 2013, he said, Steve, he says, I've hit kind of a flat spot in my recovery. And he was sharing that about himself with me. And he says, I'd like to start on something. I wonder if you would do it with me. And we got re-engaged in the 11th step in a different way. And we began to share our morning and evening disciplines with each other. And that grew. I promise you that there are some people on here. Don now sends out a daily meditation that literally ends up getting to thousands of people. He spends about 3 hours a day just forwarding those texts. We got a tech person working with him. We're trying to save him some time on that. But I engaged with that for a while, and that was part of this adventure, part of navigating all of these different ways to try to connect with this power greater than myself, to try to build upon this conscious awareness of God's presence in my life. Later in 2013, I went on a sober vacation trip that I'd been invited on. Some other people were there, and my friend Bob B from Minneapolis was on the trip, and Bob and I were spending some time together one afternoon, and he began to talk to me about the books and authors that he had begun to were meaningful and helpful to him. And he introduced me to some literature and then I've added to that with some of my own. But there was Anthony DeMello and Roger Walsh and Richard Rohr and Rami Shapiro and Ernie Kurtz with The Spirituality of Imperfection. And I began to bring these books into my spiritual discipline, and that has become a huge part of this conscious contact of reaching out to this and an awareness of this God of my understanding, and feeling His presence with me. So every morning now I tend to read from one or more of these books to try to just find something that works for me. In 2016, which is, at least I'm a little late to the tech game, but in 2016, it seems like there was just a plethora of these meditation apps that began to show up everywhere. Insight Timer, and now Headspace and Calm, and a variety of ones. And I also realized I could go on, Google on YouTube and find guided meditations. And I began to utilize these guided meditations. Not every day, not every time. They became a part of the spiritual buffet that I dine off of. And particularly when my head is spinning and the white noise is really going on, and sometimes I'll try to spend a few minutes and let it quieten down. And if it won't, I'll fire up one of the guided meditations to replace that committee voice in my head. And I pull from different types of things that have been immensely useful for me. Unbelievably useful for me. I often go to bed at night with a sleep meditation going on, and it's funny. Connie used to make fun of me because I'd have these earbuds in the bed, and a few months ago she was having trouble sleeping, and now she will play a meditation on her side of the bed as well, and we got going on, but it's just that these tools are available for a guy like me, and that's part of the individual adventure. There's not a right or a wrong, or a good or a bad, in my opinion. And I have gone, so 2018, I had gone through, went to Aspen, Colorado. My friend Jack invited me up there to speak at an AA conference in Aspen. And I got up on Saturday night to speak to the group there, and I started talking, and about 10 minutes into this talk, I'm telling you, I was empty. I was talking, but I had no connection to the talk I was giving. And even more uncomfortable, I had no connection to the people I was giving it to. I felt totally disconnected from the folks in the audience. I mean, I remembered the words, right? I knew the words to the song, but it just felt like sometimes maybe that band that's playing their one hit for the 3,000th time, and they're just not into it. It's just words. It's not an experience, and that's what I was feeling. And I was really put off. It knocked me off balance. And my friend Carl M was there. Some of you know Carl, and Carl and I were talking later. And I told Carl about this experience, and he was trying to be a good friend, right? He was trying to be polite, and he said, "Well, Steve," he said that wasn't your best talk. He said, "But it wasn't that bad." And I said, "Carl, you're misunderstanding me, man." I said, "I'm not worried about the talk. I'm worried about the guy that gave the talk." I'm worried about me. I'm worried about that disconnection. And I flew home that Sunday, and Monday morning I went to a early morning meeting at the clubhouse here in Nashville at 202, and it was an 11th step meeting. And as we began to read through that 12 and 12, what I realized is I had not, my morning discipline and my 11th step practice had gone from pretty disciplined to casual to sporadic to resistant. And I had spent the last few months not praying and meditating and not forgetting to do it, thinking about doing it and deciding not to do. I'm saying, hey, am I going to pray and meditate, or am I going to turn on Sports Center? I turned on Sports Center, and I will tell you, it is not a sufficient substitute for prayer and meditation. But I did know all of everybody's batting average, and so that was important, you know, in trivia conversations. But I had become disconnected. I had become unconscious. I had fallen spiritually asleep. And when that happens, I am disconnected from you as well as God, because I don't think I can be connected to God and not be connected to you. And I don't believe I can be connected to you and not be connected to God, because I think that the fundamental idea of God is deep within every man, woman, and child, and that is a connection place for us. Now I'm going to finish this up by telling you about 2000. Right after that 2018 incident, I got together. I was sponsoring a young guy and just started sponsoring him. And I actually, in the height of that hypocrisy we spoke about earlier, when I would sponsor a new guy, I would ask him to do that end of day review and send it to me, and do the on awakening process and send it to me for 30 days to help us kind of get acquainted. And this new guy was really excited. He thought this, you know, most guys are kind of hanging their head like it feels like homework, you know, but this guy was really excited. And he said, oh man, he said, Steve, that sounds great. He said, so you do that? And I went, well, I do now. And I said, apparently I do now. And we started doing that, and I started sharing that with some other people. And ultimately for about that 4 years, from early 2018 through 2 weeks ago, I did that until I sent out a message. I'm going to share with you. Let me share with you two things. I forgot to tell you, I just want to read an entry from April 19th of 2010. It says, this morning, I'm spending a little time reading The Spirituality of Imperfection. More than any other book or philosophy, Kurt speaks to me regarding my own experiences so far. Meister Eckhart wrote almost 700 years ago, to get to the core of God, at his greatest, one might first get to the core of himself. So in April of 2010, in a different book, I was journaling. On April 12th of 2021, 2 weeks ago, I sent out, and Ali was one of the people who got this. I sent out an announcement to the people that I've been doing this exercise with for 4 years. And it says, for me, today's reading and takeaway from the reading began as a personal spiritual exercise. I would read and contemplate the personal impact of the reading had on me, then share it with those who requested I do so. But lately, I've caught myself turning what should be a personal and spiritual quiet time into an intellectual and academic exercise. I find myself writing to you rather than for me. What had happened over the period of these years, slowly, imperceptibly, what was at first a very personal and spiritual exercise was replaced by me writing stuff for you to read, right? What could be a bigger waste of your time than me writing something for you to read? rather than sharing something personal in and unto me. And it was very subtle shift. And so I ended that on April the 12th. Well, we're sitting here on May the 4th. And what I have been, I was going to say struggling with, but Howard would make fun of me again. I am bouncing back and forth between adopting a new exercise, my next adventure. What is my next adventure relative to how I want to, what spiritual discipline do I want to approach? I'm saying a prayer in the morning and I'm doing some stuff, but what do I want to do now to stretch my spiritual muscles to continue to grow along spiritual lines? You know, it said that at the end of We Agnostics, it says that he has come to all who have earnestly sought him. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. On page 164 in our book, it says that he will disclose more to you and to me. He will continue to disclose more to you and to me. To disclose. So the question that I have to ask myself, and that if I come on here at 9 months from now, I hope that I can share with you where the new adventure, where the next road I've taken, what have I added to my spiritual exercises and disciplines? What's the new route? Did I take the shortest route? Did I take the scenic route? Have I taken a side road? At the end of the day, as long as I'm on the road, less traveled, I believe that I will end up finding God, not at the end of my journey, but in the moment of the journey. Thank you guys for having me tonight.